All right, so Future AO Friday, we are featuring Mr. Jordan Allen as our speaker this morning. He came in February direct to me. In February, he wrote an accidental app on himself for virtually nothing. Don't even know if it issued or not. March, absolutely nothing, 0 apps. In April, he wrote one for 430 total APV. In May, nothing at all. June, he got 3 apps for 1900. July built on a little bit. 4 apps for 37. August last month, 7 apps for 6,700. This month, he's at 12 apps for 14,500. But more exciting than his continued progression in production are the text messages he sends me. I tell my agents all the time, my favorite ones are the ones that blow up my phone the most. So I get this text from him yesterday, and I'm going to read several text messages throughout these months. He goes, 2 appointments on the calendar, 2 appointments showed, 2 policies closed, 2 Americo apps in the books. I'm at a little over a 70% show rate, and my close rate is hovering right about 50%. Says last week he sends me a text message. 950 APV instant issue LGA, as well as around 480 APV MU AD. Listen to this. Power went out in our town 30 minutes before the call, so I drove to the next town's coffee shop. They're closed, but I was able to get Wi-Fi from their parking lot and run this appointment. And then he sends another one going back before. And there's so many resources out there. I'm having such a fun time getting dialed in. And although my action isn't massive, I'm constantly correcting with the time I have to allot to this. Going back even further, had a fun one last night. I started to write an app for a mom and her son for mortgage protection. We got to the point of entering her banking info. They both got a little uneasy. I was able to overcome that and move forward. And by the end, the son wanted to hop on an interview to join Symmetry. He already has his life and health license. I just hopped off the call with him. He wants me to send the onboarding link. In addition to that, I may be replacing a policy for mom who's paying twice as much as she should for a whole life product and adding some mortgage protection to that. So whether he writes the policy or not, it's still a win. So you're talking to a guy that took months to figure this out, has overcome problems, dove in, corrected, blows up my phone as his mentor with questions and wins and fantastic attitude. I'm going to turn this show on over to you, Jordan Allen.
Thank you, Jim. That is, it's been so much fun here at Symmetry, and I'm going to go through my story, guys, and just kind of paint a little picture of where I came from and how I ended up here. But like Jim said, this journey has been so fun, and each step of the way, the obstacles, guys, we can do hard things, and let's get started here. So there's a few things that have been deeply impressed upon me in my journey. We'll go through a few of them. The first and foremost, the importance of my life being built around my faith in Jesus and his power to save and redeem the time that was lost. Secondly, would be hope and miracles, belief for a better tomorrow, that we can change our lives and overcome limiting beliefs. Third would be the importance of a crystal clear vision for where we want to go in life. Fourth, the power of making a committed decision before even knowing how it's going to work. And fifth, the importance of mentorship, coaching, and trusting the Symmetry system. So we'll take you back a little bit. I grew up in a suburban home. I was the son of a preacher. I found school to be easy. As a byproduct, I created my own challenges by getting into trouble. For as long as I could remember, I was uncomfortable in my own skin. But I got super focused on a goal. I had a clear vision of what I wanted beginning in middle school. There were some folks in our church, they let me exchange my time doing work around their properties, yard work, for flying lessons. And I fell in love with flying. I was determined to go to the Naval Academy. I was logging hours in a little single engine Cessna and moving towards that. And at the beginning of high school, I already had the state senator's endorsements to go to the Naval Academy. Academically, I was a shoo-in. I had a setback, though, which we all have in lives. For me, it was a medical complication in 8th grade that would change the trajectory of my life. I ended up having a surgery. I was put on synthetic hormones, and due to the side effects of those, I was taken to a psychiatrist and prescribed a slew of medications. At the age of 14, I found myself prescribed antidepressants, amphetamines, benzos like Xanax for anxiety. And rather than learning coping mechanisms, I learned that there was a pill to manage feelings and the problems in life. Later on in high school, fast forward a bit, I got the letter back from the Naval Academy letting me know that I wasn't accepted due to a history of a mood disorder, and I was bereft. I was so focused on that goal, I didn't in my teenage mind know how to recalibrate and move on. I essentially said, Screw this, I'm done trying to do it the right way." Now, we hear a lot on these calls and in symmetry coaching in culture about the importance of association. That maxim that holds true in all arenas of life. You see, that family that helped fund the beginnings of my pilot career at the time, they'd given me this little wooden plaque. I had it hanging in my room, and it said, "Fly with the crows, get shot with the crows." I didn't heed that advice at the time, but it ended up being a little prophetic for where things were going. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, self-medicating. I discovered opiates. They numbed the pain. I ended up getting kicked out of my house senior year of high school, and I'd go on to spend 10 years of trying to escape the pain, self-medicating, in and out of rehabs, psych hospitals, homeless shelters. But I remember being homeless down in Fort Lauderdale, and I got this idea that I'd go back to school. I ended up with that goal and that vision. I got my parents to agree to help with community college and if I kept my grades up. And for the most part, I stopped using opiates, but I was still partying and self-medicating. I transferred up to Temple University in Philly. I studied psychology and neuroscience. I was determined to understand my mind, the pain, the struggle. And fast forward a bit, I ended up graduating from a pretty prestigious university in Philly with a master's degree because I had never been more empty. You see, that what I was chasing, that I thought would make me happy or at least content, the degrees, the titles behind my name were nothing but vapor and vanity. I was never more empty or depressed than I was after achieving that goal and realizing that it wasn't the answer to the void in my heart. Now, we had a family friend who was a physician and she just started her own family practice. She asked me what I really wanted out of life, and she had me write it down. I still have it on a yellow legal pad. And you see, what I desired more than anything was a family, a wife, kids, stability. I couldn't see my way out of the situation, but this woman could, and I borrowed belief from her. We hear that a lot in symmetry about borrowing belief, and that's huge. It ties into the vision. Because I can't overemphasize the power of having a clear vision. And scripture says, without a vision, people lose hope or cast off restraint. But in that moment, I got super focused on something to work towards rather than just trying to escape. Um, that doctor ended up tapering me off the high amount of Xanax I was prescribed elsewhere. We found a faith-based long-term rehab, and I had always resisted doing anything long-term. I wasn't willing to give up my friends, the lifestyle, and to stop doing it my way. But I moved in with her family. I fully surrendered to the process of taking responsibility for my life. I knew that God was real up to that time, but he was distant and impersonal. I'm sure there were countless times when I cried out the name of Jesus and was miraculously rescued from life-altering situations. I had survived numerous accidental overdoses and intentional attempts to take my life, but I knew that I was here for a reason, and like it or not, I was stuck here. I knew there was more for me, and I would follow his ways. And unlearning a decade of behaviors and the biochemistry from all those substances was intense, to say the least. After going through what I did detoxing, I realized that there's no easy button for the important things in life. Life doesn't get easier. We get stronger. And like I said at the beginning, we can do hard things. Some things you just have to face and go through. Now, Jesus took away all desire for me to escape, to self-medicate. And all at once, at the age of 27, I began to learn and practice self-discipline. My mind slowly came back online. I worked as a chimney sweep with humble beginnings. I had the opportunity to go back to school, take some additional courses towards becoming a special ed teacher. I experienced miracle after miracle. I met my future wife. My criminal record was miraculously expunged. right the week of that it was time to apply for student teaching, the Lord opened doors. It was the red carpet. I subbed for a couple months. I got offered a teaching contract with one of the highest paid school districts in Pennsylvania. And by many degrees, I thought it had arrived. By the grace of God, I achieved some measure of normalcy. I was doing the thing. But a few years into marriage, my wife and I had another breakthrough. She was frustrated that I was still bound and dependent on so many prescription meds. I was still on mood stabilizers, antidepressants, muscle relaxers, Adderall, about a dozen, and I couldn't even conceive of a life free of all that. But again, I borrowed belief and my wife's vision that this was even possible. We started working with a naturopath, and through a series of miracles again, and slowly over the course of a few years, milligram by milligram, I tapered off all of those meds. We experienced another miracle as my wife got pregnant. We had our first child, Esther, in 2021. You see, part of that medical thing that happened when I was 13, I was told that I would never have kids. But despite all that, in many ways, we were still stuck. I was stuck in a little rented condo. We had poured all our monies into my health journey, supplements, testing, naturopaths. We'd forgone purchasing a home to focus on my health, and we were running out of room in that condo. I began to have an unction that there was more for me than teaching. After 8 years of elementary special ed, I was burning out. We felt the pain of not having a yard for our daughter to play in. Until that time, I had the fixed mindset pretty much that, this is it, Chief. I'm a teacher, end of story. But back to borrowing belief and having a vision. We received wise counsel from a dear friend, and he started to teach us all about making committed decisions, the economy of God's kingdom, about abundance, and that there was more than enough to go around. We made a committed decision to expand as a family. And then last March, all in the same week, we found out that we were pregnant again and that our landlord wanted to sell the condo. So we couldn't stay there. We couldn't afford to purchase a home in the area where we were living. But we had a friend down in Atlanta, and he had an incredible testimony of seeing supernatural abundance and stepping out in faith. And we packed up as a family. We moved to Atlanta. I found a teaching job down here, took a $40,000 pay cut, but we did move into a gorgeous home, big yard, quiet cul-de-sac, living the dream, not at all sure how we were going to afford it. I burned through my pension and was working full-time as a teacher and part-time with another startup. But about a year prior, the Lord kept bringing life insurance into my vision. I ended up starting with a captive life insurance company. Their angle is you just burn through your network. That felt shady. I hopped to another captive agency. I never started actually producing there either. I learned some unethical things about them. Then all of a sudden, Jim's posts started popping out to me on Facebook. This is how the brain starts to find solutions when we make that committed decision. So, like Jim said, in February of this year, I signed up with Symmetry. We got started with life insurance while teaching and working at another startup. So, fast forward to this past November, our son Enoch was born. My wife has single-handedly really raised the kids as we've been grinding. But we've been all in as a family, and this wouldn't have been possible without Tara, believing in this system and in Symmetry. She looks forward to the accountability calls. Every morning we're on them as a family watching. So this past May, at the end of my first year teaching in Atlanta, the 10th year teaching overall, I made that committed decision to quit the teaching job, trusting that Jehovah Jireh, in Hebrew, that means God who provides, would provide. I focused on Symmetry and this other startup, and I've been doing this, doing what my mentors tell me, like Jim said. Our backs have been against the wall, but we firmly believe in this system. The culture of Symmetry is the one that builds leaders by calling them higher, setting a standard of excellence and bridging the gap for people to build belief on how to get there. So this past June, I had signed up. I was about to pay for Jeremy Miner's NEPQ sales program, but I texted with Jim and he advised against it. He said, we have so many resources here, don't worry about it. But that couldn't be more true. My first month on the Ninjas, this accountability call, Jim had invited Ashton Delangalunde to lead it. That was life-changing for me. I practiced that script day in and day out. My 4-year-old Esther, she would catch me trying to practice on my own. She would practice with me. My wife in the shower. I was just focused on setting calls, like going through the bases, like Jim says. Getting curious, obsessing over learning the next step, and then the next step, doing what the coaches say to do. never missing an accountability call. Like Jim said, with the text is intense self-reflection for how to master the next step. With Ashton's help in the NEPQ script, I got down to the final expense, general life presentation and began closing deals, but I was still pretty lost when it came to mortgage protection. And I've had the opportunity to work with Will Van Vleck. That's been transformative for the mortgage protection business. I'm not there yet, but with every rep, I'm getting there. Like Jim said, my show rate's around 70%, close rate's about 54% now. And we hear it all the time, guys. Know your ratios. And I can't stress this enough. They're going to direct your attention to what's needed most. There's so many resources here. It's really that you have not because you ask not. Like if you see someone that has something that you want, reach out. That's what I've done, and I've been amazed at our culture here. How many people are willing to help, even if there's no monetary reason or gain that they'll get out of it. It goes to show how invaluable the mentorship, coaching, the community here at Symmetry is. Kristen Mothershead, she has a treasure of resources. I'm in her Google Drive almost daily. There's just so much here. Listening to podcasts, hopping on calls and trainings, find nuggets from others and incorporate it in your own business. So I'll leave it, you guys with this at the end. So everything in life is redeemable. I firmly believe that everything's redeemable. Mindset and your words matter. Scripture says death and life are in the power of the tongue, and as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Guys, get super clear on a vision for your life in this business. Write it down, rehearse it, and if you need to, borrow belief from other stories. Whatever you're going to do, make a committed decision, burn the boat, so to speak, and go all in. Once you make that committed decision, you're going to find the solutions. Finally, trust the system, get curious, obsess over learning and improving, get your ratios down and figure out where you need to go. Ask for help. There's so much here. And Jim, that's all I got.